There we go. There we go. It's a nice little one. A little too small to keep, but definitely enough to keep you going. Let's talk a little bit about these little minnows. These things work really well, and I really prefer the black ones, the black and silver ones. But every time I go to find them at the tackle shop, they either have the wrong size, the wrong color, the wrong shape. Something's always missing, and I'm really getting frustrated trying to find what I need. So today, we're making our own. Let's go back to the shop. Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. My name's Franco. I'm a professional engineer, a lure designer, and lure maker. And that's the lure I made last time. Let me show you what I have in mind this time. So this is the general shape of all these little minnows that I've been buying and using, and they work pretty well. But what I have been finding is that the slender this tail area, the more action you get, the more consistent the bite is on them. And a size that's about 1.5 to 2 inches, no greater than 2 inches, usually works best. Anything bigger than that and the bite sort of drops off to almost nothing. Smaller than that and you start picking up really little ones and bluegill. So this is the general shape. What I don't like about this general shape is that when you put in a jig, you end up with this sort of end of the head and then a ball with an eye on it, which to me looks really unnatural. And the little bit of a barb that's on these things really doesn't hold well with this really tapered head. So I want to design something a little different than that. I want it to have a little bit more depth to the body so the hook isn't as exposed as typically it is. Plus I want this to be really slender in the back. It's probably not going to have as natural a shape as this, but I think the shape that we're going to end up with is going to work a little better. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is the shape I'm going to go ahead and make. And I plan to make at least 3 of them because they're all going to be masters so that we can make a mold and obviously cast them out of soft plastic. So to simplify the build and make this quick, I'm going to use some easy to use materials. I'm going to make the body out of pieces of these tongue depressors, and this long stem that connects to the little boot tail will be made out of sections of this bamboo skewer. The disc itself, we're going to go ahead and just cut out from a little piece of plastic. But the idea here is that when you put the jig head in here, it'll fit right into that little slot, making it look a little more natural, and the eyeball will actually look like it's part of the body. The hook can then route down here and be less exposed at the very top. And of course, I have all this meat in the body here to catch on the little bit of a barb that the actual jig head has. And this really slender tail section is going to make it so that tail just flops around real easy. Even if it's just sitting under a bobber, this little tail will wiggle around quite a bit. And I'm counting on that to generate the bite. All right, let me show you how I'm going to make this. So I'll take my bundle of tongue depressors, and just looking through it, I'm going to pick out the ones that have the least amount of warp in them. There's another nice one, and there's another good one. I'm going to go ahead and put them together evenly and then take the center one and I'll set it a little bit down, about 1.5 millimeters, I guess. And once I'm satisfied that both sides are sort of evenly offset from the center, I'll clamp them together so they don't budge on me. So I want to make sure they're aligned this way so that they're parallel to each other. And now I just want to get some crazy glue down into these gaps. I'll wipe away the excess with a paper towel and then put another clamp up high. I hit it with a little bit of accelerator and I'll give it just a minute or so to set up good and hard. And now that it's set up, I'm going to cut off probably a little less than half of this section just so it's easy to hold on to and easy to work. Now I'm going to make a mark that's right at 3/8 of an inch from the lowest lobe and strike a nice perpendicular line right there. So that's going to be the part of the main body. Now I'm going to take a Dremel tool, carve out that little notch. All right, that should do it. All right, now I'm going to take a push pin to mark a little spot where I'm going to drill the hole for the tail so I can try to get as precisely in the middle of this center tongue depressor as I can. I think that's pretty nicely centered. Now we can go ahead and drill a little pilot hole. And when you select your skewer, make sure yours is nice and round, because some of them tend to have like flat spots and stuff. This one is about as round as you're going to find them. I'm going to taper it down just a little bit, so this drill bit that's just slightly smaller than it should work just fine. And you know, a lot of folks really cringe when they see me drilling things with actually using my hands as a vise. But I usually put it all in fast speed, and it looks a lot sketchier than it really is, because generally true speed is like this. And I'm pretty safe with this. I almost never hurt myself doing this anyway. All right, and we don't have to go very deep. It's just a little bit of a socket so we can put a tail in it. And this will be tapered down just a little bit from that. And to be able to taper it, I'm gonna go ahead and just cut a section off, put it in my drill chuck, and with some 80 grit sandpaper, I'm just gonna spin this on the sandpaper block and hold it with my fingers. And the idea is to create a taper that's maybe 3/4, 5/8 of an inch, so that it tapers towards the tail. And then I'm gonna cut it off. And it fits perfectly in that hole. So since I want it to be right at 1.5 inches, I've got to cut, looks like about 1/4 inch off the tail. And scoring it with a razor blade usually works pretty well. And then I'll just sand it back nice and flat. All right, to make the little disc for the tail, I'm just using this little punch. And I'm going to use my little drill press. And I'm going to be cutting it out of this little piece of plastic. And this is just one of those little organizer box, little segments that go in there to separate the little compartments. All right, there's the little disc. And I'll just clean up the edges with this sanding board here. And I'll rough up all the surfaces, because I am going to put a little bit of clear coat on everything to make it glossy. So we end up with nice, shiny, soft plastic lures. Hopefully that is. And this is probably the trickiest part of the whole build, is getting a hole in this little disc. Just take my time here. And the trick is holding on to the doggone thing. And I think that's got it. Clean it up again. All right, and we just poke the tail into it. Make sure it's nice and straight. Put the other end in the back of the body, almost ready to glue together. All right, and so I'm going to be cutting it just above the line that I drew, and then we'll sand back a little bit. All right, we're ready to assemble. And that's just a matter of putting a couple of drops of crazy glue on each one of the parts. Just making sure that the tail is nice and straight. And now I'm going to glue the disc on the tail, a little swim disc. And I'll put a little on the inside too. And I like to wipe away the excess. Now I can finish with the sanding, and that's just a matter of taking off these hard edges so it doesn't look so blocky. I like to seal it now with some crazy glue. What I do is just get a little bit of crazy glue on there, and then use this paper towel kind of as a paintbrush to spread it out smoothly. And you gotta kind of work fast. You don't want to get it so that it's all clumpy or sets up with a bunch of texture. I'll let that set, and I'll do the same thing up here on the tail. And I'm gonna put almost nothing on this thing. I'm gonna try to work with a really dry brush here and just spread whatever I have on the brush real thin everywhere. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now we can put it in here, where I have 2 other ones already turning. So we're gonna go ahead and go with 3. I'll end up with a triple mold. That should be enough for me. Let's turn the lights on. So before we get started with the mold box, we gotta kind of design the mold box. And you wanna know where you wanna sort of fill in from on your lure or whatever it is you're pouring. So I wanna fill in from the very top, this flat spot, because after I unmold it, there'll be a little piece of sort of waste rubber there, and I can slice it off with a razor blade and it won't show. I'm gonna use a small piece of CPVC as my center reservoir, and a sprue going through the top so I can fill it, and then I'll arrange the little minnows around it. So one on this side, one on that side, and one on the bottom. Sort of like that. And there'll be connections right here on each one of them so the soft plastics can fill the bodies. So that's what the mold will look like. Now I just need to figure out the dimensions for them. My PVC is 5/8 of an inch. I want 3/8 of an inch between the PVC and the actual little minnow. The minnow is a 1/2 inch, and then I want about 3/8 of an inch on the very outside. So if you add up these 3, that's 1 1/4 inches, and that'll be the same on this side. So 1¼ and 1¼ that's 2½ plus 5/8. So that's 3 1/8 inch will be the total width. For the height, we know the height of the little minnow is 1½ and then 3/8, a ½ inch for the minnow and 3/8 for the edge. And I think we just need a ½ inch for above the reservoir. So that's 3 1/4. So we might as well make it perfectly square and make it 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. So I'm almost done preparing the mold box with the clay in it. And I just wanted to take a moment and remind you guys that we actually haven't had a question of the week in a little while. I haven't had a question that I couldn't answer easily enough in the comments, so I've been holding off. But in lieu of that, I just want to answer sort of a group of questions and comments I've been getting. And a lot of folks are talking about how they're trying to get into the hobby and that they don't have the tools or they don't have the confidence or they're a little intimidated to just get into it. And to them, I would say, don't put it off. Just do it. Just do it with what you can. And I know lots of folks look at my shop and say, wow, man, this guy's got a whole shop just dedicated to this little hobby. And yeah, I agree. It's a real luxury for me to have this. I actually built this and designed it and engineered it all myself. It took me a little over a year to build this little space. But you don't need this. You really don't. This is sort of excessive. So if you just have a corner in your apartment, if you got a spot on your balcony, if you can throw a towel over your washer and dryer and just stand there and do what you can with your hands and the few hand tools, just do it. I honestly believe that you really get more out of it with less. You really do. So just jump into it, build your first lure. Check out the videos that I've done with really simple builds, with really simple, easy to source materials. Some of them are basically free. Carve it with your hands, sand it with a little sandpaper, seal it with cheap paint, and put details on there with nail polish. It really doesn't matter. Once you get your hands in it, and once you fish with your own lures and catch something, then you'll know whether you want to keep it simple or make it more complicated and move into things like making molds and that sort of thing. But don't put it off. Go ahead and make your own lures and go fishing. At least go fishing. So the clay I'm using in the mold box is this Sculptec stuff, and it's sulfur free. It'll play nice with both the Tin Cure and the Platinum Cure molding silicone. All right, I had to get a little creative to get a 3½ by 3½, and a little more is better than too little. So the first thing I want to do is set my little reservoir cylinder, and I'll just eyeball that and make sure I've got just a little more than ½ inch. And since I want it embedded about halfway down, I'm going to go ahead and remove some clay. All right, that's about got it. In the areas where I over excavate, I just fill back in with some scrap. Then it's just a matter of doing the same thing with the little minnows, positioning them, digging out the clay, and then placing them down in there about halfway deep. I'm going to use little pieces of the bamboo skewer to form little channels for the rubber to flow. And I'll use some of this thin solder for vents. This will keep the bubbles from forming while I'm pouring the rubber. And I'll put that anywhere where I think air might get trapped. It's a little bit tedious, but really necessary. The more you put in, the better. And I'll form this little funnel-shaped sprue out of clay, and that way I can pour in the rubber right through there. And I'll build the sides of the box up a little bit so that I have enough clearance to have about 1/4 inch above the top of the pour. And I'll make some accurate measurements of the depth, the width, and the length of the box so that I can figure out how much of this silicone to mix. And after drizzling a little bit on top of the lures, I can pour the rest from one corner and have it fill in the whole box, nice and level. And here's a pro tip. Leave your stirring stick in the bottom of the cup, and when it sets, you'll be able to pull the whole thing out in one long piece. So I'm going to go ahead and let this set for probably 3 or 4 hours because that's all it takes. This stuff is really quick. It's probably the quickest setting silicone I've ever used. I'm super impressed with this stuff. It's called BB Dinos, and because I'm a cheapskate, it's also a good price. I think I paid $15 for this, $16 for it, including shipping. I think it's on Amazon. If it is, I'll put a link in the store. If it's not, I'll put a link in the description below. I don't get this stuff for free. I pay for it, and they don't sponsor me in any way. And it is Platinum Cure, so it'll tend to last a little longer as a mold. So while this sets, I'm going to get on the tractor and do a little work. All right, it's been a few hours, and it looks like it's set pretty well. And that looks real nice too. Let's see if I can pull this out, kind of like I said. You get the whole sleeve and a nice clean cup. Works pretty good. All right, let's see if we can pull this apart. So the idea is you got to get the clay out from the back of it. And if you can get it out in one piece, it'll make your life a lot easier. Spending a little extra time getting this out will save you a lot of time later. There we go. Ended up with a couple of the minnows in the clay, but that's okay. We'll put them back in. And I'll make sure all the vents are in the right spot. Vaseline all the existing silicone in there, and then we'll pour the next layer. So while I'm putting these back, I'll clean them up a little bit too. And make sure they're not carrying any clay with them. And that's the little piece of clay I put in there to form the sprue. So I'm going to put a little piece of clay to form the other half of that. Doesn't have to be anything special. And that should do it. And then it's just a matter of putting some petroleum jelly as a release agent. And I'll brush that on just to the silicone, not to anything else. Well, it's real important to get everything, but these little keys, real important to get. You don't want those sticking. And since the mold box is basically the same depth on this side as the other side, I was able to go ahead and just mix the same amount, which is a total of 100 milliliters. All right, I've got it mixed up pretty well. I'm gonna go ahead and just drizzle the silicone on the actual lures just to make sure we don't get bubbles on them. And you got plenty of time at this point. It's the nice thing about silicone, there's no real rush. All right, and we can just start pouring up. I like to pour from a corner in a very thin stream and let it fill in all the little cavities nice and slowly. And no waste, just like I like it. All right, I just finished up on the tractor. Let's see where we are. I'm pushing my luck a little bit. It definitely feels nice and set, but the instructions say that while it gets hard in 4 to 5 hours, you shouldn't really use it for 24, but we're gonna do it anyway. All right, a little cleaning up to do. And of course, the always nerve-wracking moment of opening this thing up. Whew, there it is. All right, a little bit of cleanup and making sure our vents are all going to be open. And we'll heat up some soft plastic and get our first poured. And I gotta say, that looks pretty good. All right, I mixed this color up yesterday. It looks kind of pink on the camera, but it's kind of, I don't know what the heck color this is. I was trying to go with a kind of a fleshy tone. It's pearlescent white with silver flecks and a dash of violet powder pigment. Came out a little more pink than I wanted to, but I still think it's gonna look pretty good. We're gonna go with it anyway. I don't wanna mix another thing. I think we've cast enough for us to be able to get down to the lake and do a little fishing. There's our stash. Put a little bit of oil on them just to keep them from sticking together. And of course, I look in my tackle box and I don't really have any appropriate jig heads, but I've got a couple old ones. So that's what the rig is gonna look like. And I really love the way that jig head just sort of becomes part of the body and that hook is just the right amount exposed. All right, the first thing I want to do is try it out in the water. Let's get some underwater shots. Let's see what kind of wobble it has. Looks pretty good. These little guys all wobble about the same. Let's see if it skips at all. Ooh, skips like a champ. All right, let's try somebody else's dock. Oh yeah, I felt him just as this thing was dropping. All right, that was quick. Little dude, he was hungry. Look at that, man. He inhaled that thing. And see that black stuff on my hand? That's why they call him black crappie. Pretty little fish. Let's let him go. Try a couple more casts over here. Man, I love the way this thing skips. It must be that really broad, flat side. It has a really nice little tail shimmy. It really does look like a little minnow that's really trying to get away. Oh, I thought I had another one. There it is. Oh, that was a good cast. This one feels a lot better. All right. Oh yeah, this one is a keeper. Just barely though. He fought like way above his weight class. There we go. Right at 12 and a quarter inches. All right, let's let him go. Man, I tell you what, I wish I could claim that I designed it to skip really well, because it skips really well. Well, I guess I could claim that. You guys wouldn't know. Yeah, man, that was my primary design feature on this. Skipping. Oh, there we go. And catching fish too. Ooh. That's another nice one. Oh. That's another 12-incher right there. Pretty ugly release. All right, one more strategy. All right, we're trolling. Let's see which one gets hit. All right, we're hooked up. Let's see who's the winner here. Oh, came off. Anyway, it was this. All right, we're hooked up. This is the second hookup. Same lure. Little guy. Right on the lower lip. Hey guys, they definitely go for it. This guy's little. Just so you don't think I'm just talking nonsense, this guy was in the water the whole time. Nobody touched it. For now, this is all the time I have for this video. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of a detour from what we're normally doing. I almost never do soft plastics, but this really was fun. Keep those comments coming, keep those suggestions coming, and don't forget to leave a like, and of course, subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you guys in the next video.